Sandy Koufax and Hank Greenberg explored new ways to find acceptance for Jewish athletes by making controversial absences, fighting through adversity, and making an impact on modern society. While being controversial at the time, Greenberg sitting out for Yom Kippur in the 1930s and then Koufax in the 60s, it eventually allowed for a huge acceptance of Jewish observances. And even though Greenberg and Koufax faced constant anti-Semitic slurs, they fought through it and remained two of the greatest players in the history of baseball, and they became pioneers and explorers of Jewish rights. Born in New York City on January 1, 1911, Hank Greenberg became one of Major League Baseball's first Jewish superstars while playing for the Detroit Tigers. A native of the Bronx, it was not surprising when Greenberg was offered a contract by the New York Yankees. However, he was not willing to compete against Lou Gehrig for the first base position and instead signed with the Detroit Tigers, facing anti-Semitism at home and on the road. After a good but not outstanding rookie season in 1933, Hank Greenberg became one of the most feared sluggers in the game of baseball. From 1934 through 1940, he played 6 full seasons at 2 different positions, left field and first base. In September 1934, it was the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah. Hank Greenberg and the Detroit Tigers were in the middle of a heated pennant race, and Greenberg didn't know if he was going to play. Greenberg had been flooded with advice from Jews and rabbis across the country, some telling him to honor his faith and sit out the game, while with others saying he should help his team. In the end, Greenberg did play and belted 2 home runs to lead his team to a 2-1 victory. 9 days later, Greenberg sat out for Yom Kippur, which is with his team nearly clinched in the playoffs. The Tigers lost that game 5-2. In the 1930s, American anti-Semitism was intensified by an economic depression at home, political developments abroad, and a large influx of Jews in the United States in the early 20th century. Every ballpark I went to, there'd be somebody in the stands who spent the whole afternoon just calling me names, Hank Greenberg recalled in a 1980 oral history. I had the opportunity to interview Rabbi Gary Klein of Temple Ahavat Shalom in Palm Harbor, Florida. Rabbi Klein gave me some insight on Hank Greenberg, Sandy Koufax, and Jewish beliefs that might have influenced these 2 players.
Well, as you just pointed out, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are called the High Holy Days. They are the holiest days in the Jewish calendar. I mean, Judaism teaches that every day is holy and every day is a precious gift from God. But the High Holy Days are very special. But when Sandy Koufax made his now famous decision in the fall of 1965, I was 16. And I can remember how proud I felt and that he had made that decision. And I can remember all the Jewish adults around me, my father and my mother and my grandparents and my aunts and my uncles. And I had some Jewish teachers in public school because I lived in a community in New Jersey where there were a lot of Jewish people. There were some Jewish teachers in school, just as we have some Jewish teachers now. And I remember the teachers talking about it in the hallway to each other. It was almost as if Sandy Koufax doing what he did gave the rest of us Jews a chance to say, we belong, we're Americans, we're full-fledged Americans, we're first-class Americans, we're not second-class Americans anymore. I felt so proud to be Jewish and an American. And I felt as if Sandy Koufax helped us be part of what we might call mainstream America, and to have an honored role in American society. You know, there may have been other people influencing that. It may have been the memory of examples that their parents or grandparents set for them. It may have been advice that other people gave them at that time, or maybe many years before. Both Hank Greenberg and Sandy Koufax had to make the decisions they made. It may have been, they may have felt a lot of tension. On the one hand, they felt an obligation to do what Judaism teaches us to do in regard to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. On the other hand, as Jews, we're always taught to make the best of life. I have a hunch they were both probably pretty stressed out by the decision.
Yeah.
I have a hunch they couldn't have been happy making the decision to stay out of work or to go into work. It was like, I bet that while he thought of this as a very difficult decision and he felt tension, as I told you before, when it was all done, he probably thought, it's no big deal. I didn't do anything so special. Those guys skipping very important games, skipping what were probably the most significant days in their career to be in temple, is something that Judaism would have encouraged them to do. Jewish teaching would have encouraged them to do. Be with compassion, with generosity, with respect, with appreciation. But having a religion that teaches that you best worship God by doing things rather than just saying prayers, gives us a culture. A culture is really important because according to Judaism, when we live as Jews and follow this Jewish culture, we're worshiping God. Jewish people in America really became a much more honored people and a much more, we felt like we were much more authentic and accepted in American society after Sandy Koufax. He brought us pride and joy and legitimacy. He was a cool guy. I never met him. I'd see him on TV.
Sandy Koufax was born on December 30th, 1935 in Brooklyn, New York. He attended Lafayette High School in Brooklyn. He then went on to study at Columbia University in New York City and University of Cincinnati. Koufax was signed by the Brooklyn Dodgers as an amateur free agent in 1954 at the age of 18. On June 24, 1955, he made his first start in a Dodger uniform. Koufax was an elegant craftsman, brilliant to the extreme in the exercise of his talent, but an obsessively reluctant celebrity, less comfortable in the limelight than in the hermit-like world he fashioned for himself off the pitcher's mound. Koufax pitched a National League record 4 no-hitters, including a perfect game. In 1965, the holiest day on the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur, fell on October 6th. Game 1 of the World Series fell on the same day, and Koufax was scheduled to pitch against the Minnesota Twins. Koufax refused to play, which gained him the respect and admiration of many Jews. His courage gave many Jews the strength to not be ashamed of their Judaism. Koufax's decision remains so profound, in fact, that half a century later it still carries lessons for those raised neither with the sport nor in the United States. I also had the opportunity to talk to Dr. Dan Rutenberg, co-founder of Spear Physical Therapy and former baseball player. He said that Koufax's decision was, quote, the best thing he ever did. It gave pride and sense of belonging to Jews. I debated on playing during a holiday once in college. I sat out because of Koufax. I don't think it was a religious decision. It was based on standing up for who you are, quote. In conclusion, Sandy Koufax and Hank Greenberg explored new ways to find acceptance for Jewish athletes by making controversial absences, fighting through adversity, and making an impact on modern society. While being controversial at the time, Greenberg sitting out for Yom Kippur in the 1930s and then Koufax in the 60s, it eventually allowed for a huge acceptance of Jewish observances. And even though Greenberg and Koufax faced constant anti-Semitic slurs, they fought through it and remained 2 of the greatest players in the history of baseball, and they became pioneers and explorers of Jewish rights.